the last year, intermittently, and specifically for the 2038 issue that goes also goes to the future ideas of ways of gathering, organizing together, enacting disownership, and reenacting social relations. And that's the first time we read the hologram, to which we are honored to use as a tool, a vehicle for thoughts that are already put together in a PDF, that a publication you also have in your desktops, I believe. Alina, Kolar will share with us more about this. Last but not least, Iliana Fokianaki, the founder and director of a State of Concept, is Athens, and she is with us today as well. After a ping pong we had here, nice to see you, about the Bureau of Care, which is her most recent project, as she socially, politically, and aesthetically involves in the, a very too long list to start of, which is of ways of working together. So I would like to start our emotions seminar with her, since she will be just briefly with us. She will leave us here with a few questions, but I will pass it over to you, Liana. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, María and Alina, for the invitation. And it's a great timing as well, because just a few hours ago, my first text on the Bureau of Care was published on eFlux, which kind of analyzes a little bit more what I'm going to briefly describe today. So for those of you that want to kind of read a more analytical view, you can go there. I mean, I'm just going to start from the concept of care. I have been looking at the idea, the politics and the ethics of care these last 2 years have been kind of re-emerging in a lot of institutional discourse. They have become, we can say, a little bit of a trendy subject. And of course, the pandemic has really brought that to the fore even more. Now, of course, the question for myself, as I said, comes from the institutional position, and having founded a very small institution in Athens called State of Concept about 7 years ago, I was from the very beginning trying to really understand how institutional power works, what the art institution, let's say, emulates and mirrors in relationship to state power. So this has been kind of the core of a question that we have been asking through State of Concept, and the name, of course, also references that. And we always want to kind of, it's not a self-flagellation, but it's always a need to question our own practices and the position of the art institution in the art ecology. So my main question in the beginning of this process that led to the Bureau of Care was, how is it that art institutions are so comfortable to discuss about care when we have been so careless for decades? And I think the year of the pandemic, we have many examples. I'm not going to give names now. We are all familiar with them. We have seen larger and medium scale institutions firing or having on furlough a lot of their staff. It was always staff that had to do either with zero or flex hour contracts, or it had to do with educational departments that were deemed unnecessary, or let's say particular departments that had to do with particular groups of society, like elderly programming, etc., etc. For me, that was quite interesting, that the pandemic kind of brought forward some questions that were related to how much do we care, not only for the constituencies and the audiences that visit an art institution, but the internal, let's say, body of bodies that forms the art institution. And I think, of course, we always blame neoliberalism for everything, but indeed, because the model of the art institution has been neoliberalized a lot the last 15 years, one of the main, let's say, effects of this pandemic, which is going hand in hand with the financial crisis, of course, has been that. But I have to say that also BLM has brought forward many other questions of how institutions have been careless in relationship to diversity in the staff, subject matters, thematics and problematics that are addressed through programming, how they are addressed, how curators and their labor is recognized or not recognized enough, how the work of other cultural workers, from artists to researchers to assistants, is also recognized, etc., etc. And we have had some examples again from the United States, but not only, I would say, just to bring it, I think, some issues like the ones that occurred at the ICA in London are one example, but we have many, many more. So the main idea was that to kind of start with where and how do we begin discussing about care, its politics and its ethics. And the other thing that came became quite soon apparent was also the fact that art institutions and in general the art ecology at the moment is very comfortable in appropriating, with the kind of nice, meaning of the word, a lot of theory, be it political theory, be it sociology, be it philosophy, etc., in relationship to care, its politics and its ethics, but has not delved in to actual examples and paradigms of care, its enactment, its performance, its infrastructures that come from either activist or civil society structures that have been, in fact, very successfully, I would say, been performing care and delivering care and developing the ideas and the politics and the ethics of care for many, many decades. So this somehow formed the Bureau of Care, which basically aims to, for a lack of a better word, to learn from these structures and not to be based too much on theory in relationship to how could an art institution carefully address concepts of care and how it can enact it in its main apparatus and programming. So this is how it started. And we have been working the past years with many groups here in Athens. I'm mentioning some in the text where you can also find more information about them. One of them is O Allos Anthropos. It means the other human. That is a kitchen that has been founded by Alexandros, one man that was unemployed sometime in 2011, and he went to his local, let's say, market and tried to get some food, and he saw two children fighting for scraps of food, and it was such a stark image for him that he immediately the next day he went home, basically started making little toasties and just took 10 toasties, went to the market and started sharing his food with others. Now, after almost a decade, it's about 5.5 million portions of food that have been delivered, and thousands of volunteers throughout the years that participate in this process. And the interesting thing with that example is that there is not a structure of we cook, we deliver, or we provide. Is we cook, everybody cooks, and we all eat together. We also have been working for some time now with Melissa, is a network of migrant women in Athens that has been founded by leading figures of the migrant community in Athens, and is trying to create bonds between different groups, provides free, let's say, legal advice, lessons, childcare, does a lot of cultural activities. I mean, we've worked with them with showcasing several films of ours from an Arab feminist film festival that we did last year. And third but not least is the Open School for Migrants, is one of the many schools that exist in Athens. It's a whole network of schools where in fact they are hosted for free in normal high schools or primary schools in Athens. They are given, let's say, 1 or 2 or 3 rooms from the school, and they deliver usually during the weekends classes of Greek for migrants and refugees of all ages from all different walks of life and different places of the planet that arrive in the country. And I mean, with this experience of working with them, it was very clear to us that there are particular ways of working in these groups that are extremely valuable, and they are what one would say non-epistemic knowledges, but they are extremely important and extremely valuable knowledges of how to operate an institution of every format, or a para-institution or a non-institution institution in a very effective and democratic and non-hierarchical way. So the idea at this very moment is to begin with what we call encounters. So we have partnered with several people. Arts of the Working Class is one of our wonderful partners, to have lots of meetings that unfortunately, because of the pandemic, well, maybe not unfortunately actually, will be online. We are creating now a set of questions that are related to care. And we hope to finish with meetings sometime in June of next year. And then all the knowledge will be kind of a part of a handbook. We call it a handbook, to see what types of particular modes of operation, of how-tos that these structures have are ones that can also be applied to art institutions. And I'm going to give a crazy example, which is valorization of labor. How is it that the labor of the director of an art institution is valorized, and how is the labor of a cleaner, let's say, or a receptionist in an art institution is valorized? And I'm not saying that they should be paid the exact same amount of money for every hour that they work, but there should be a more careful way of valorizing labor and not so much disparity. And we've seen that being discussed in many assemblies, for instance, in the Open Migrant School in Piraeus, of, how do we pay X person that arrives as a volunteer, because they're all volunteers in the start. How do we start to pay for what type of labor, and how do we valorize this type of labor? And we see completely different ways of discussing labor, which, I mean, I think also it's very, very interesting to see how this type of labor is absolutely care labor as well. And it's perceived in a different way than what we are used to in, let's say, more strict, more kind of stiff, I would say, institutional structures. And the second stage, as I said, is the handbook. And then the third stage is for small exhibitions in the form of a booth or a kiosk or a little bureau that will have all this material together with the work of a lot of other initiatives that obviously we won't have time to develop relationships with, but we would like to include, and that this would travel to several locations. And before I close, I would also like to say that for me, looking into or reading again from the position, the theoretical position that is related to the politics and the ethics of care, I've also noticed that it's very rare that we discuss care not from the position of the individual. First of all, care has been considered from philosophy from the 17th century onwards as, I would say, as a way for the betterment of the self, in a way that you become a better person if you care for others. Many times, unfortunately, it has this charitable aspect to it, or in the most cases, and the most familiar ones are the ones that care is feminized and the labor of care is feminized very much. And irrespectively if it is, you know, a woman that is delivering this type of labor, one of the main reasons, and of course there have been many scholars like Silvia Federici that have really highlighted that, is that this type of labor is undervalued in the market just because it is feminized. It's considered, you know, let's say a meaner type of labor. So for me also this was interesting of how do we discuss care not as a singular act that we do for others or we receive from others, but care as a collective act which entails a different dynamics also when you operate within a group that also delivers collective joy. Because I think also contemporary society is also relating care very much with the concept of responsibility. It has been an idea that also from Heidegger, from philosophy, from, you know, older times, and also you know, the whole idea of care, cura, from Latin has this dual meaning of a positive meaning and a negative meaning. But we have somehow forgotten lately, well, not lately, for a long time now, that collective acts of care entail joy. And there is a joy in this collectivity, which I'm also very interested in exploring. And then the last point that I would like to make is also, and I think it's also open to discussion, is that this idea of self-care has been developed quite actively the last 20 years through neoliberalism. It has become a market that has, you know, brought in billions and billions of dollars and euros, etc. And there's one that we also see somehow entering the art institution as well. You know, we see art institutions that are doing yoga classes or what have you. It's kind of, again, a betterment of the self by caring for the self. And please don't take me wrong. I don't mean by any means that we shouldn't take care of ourselves. But the monetization of this type of care is also another thing that is interesting for me. And in relationship to this singular way of seeing care, I would also like to just put a small asterisk that unfortunately, even in these structures that are activist structures, you know, civil society structures, NGOs, etc., many times it is very difficult for those that are part of the infrastructure to depart from this position of the charitable, responsible person that goes there to deliver. And there are bits of slow violence that are entailed in that. And I'm leaving that as a question to you, I think, and that would be something for me interesting to discuss, like how do we also avoid, you know, these types of dynamics in groups, even though they might be from the most leftist and, you know, horizontal structures.
Thank you so much, Iliana.
Pleasure. I'm going to smoke now a fake cigarette. I hope you don't mind.
Exactly, I enjoy that.
Do it.
So I think what